I don't know if I've ever actually seen an animation cell out in the wild, but I would be thrilled to find out there was a exhibit where I can go view many of them at one given time, given that I'm currently in St. Louis, Missouri. I understand there's different exhibits and galleries. You can view these on normally the West or East Coast. Some of the large cities offer that, but not really here. That's why Trent Claus has something pretty unique. In fact, he put together his collection and you're able to witness this in an area where you normally would not be able to appreciate animation art and other production art pieces. So this is a really nice interview. I'm looking forward to speaking to Trent here, and I think you'll enjoy it too. Trent, I got to say, I'm mesmerized by the backdrop of all of these animation cells lined up one after another. That is an impressive spread. Are all of these yours?
Yeah. So this is a large chunk of my collection. It's not the whole thing, but it's a big chunk, and yeah.
That's awesome. Now, being that this is a part of your collection, it must have been fun going through your collection and deciding what to put on display. Let's kind of talk about the exhibit and what's going on and why Lincoln, Nebraska.
Sure. Yeah. So the title of the exhibit is called "Building a Narrative," and all of the work here is part of the process leading to the shows and the movies and the products that we have all grown to love over the decades and our childhoods and formative years and things. All the things that we find so familiar, but maybe don't know the backstories of or don't know the artists behind.
Yep.
So there's production art from cartoons, as you see, and then also from films and commercials and comic books and all sorts of other things as well.
So you're a visual effects artist.
Yeah, that's right. So that's what I do for a living. I do visual effects for films. Mostly people know me for my work in Marvel films. I've done 22 Marvel movies now. And this is the stuff that I do, for a hobby. This is the stuff that I'm really like fascinated by and interested in.
That is so cool. Did you ever work in this medium, or were you all digital by the time you were a professional?
No, so I, as a professional artist, I went to school for fine art, so drawing and painting and sculpture, the wet stuff. But by the time I got into the industry, it was all digital. There's only been a few occasions in my career when I've gotten to do something wet. There was a horror movie I worked on where I got to splatter some blood and make some, blood stains and things like that. A few rare occurrences have happened, but for the most part, everything I do these days is digital.
Yeah. There's you see the video sometimes where it's like the sound effects guys, and there's like they're holding the boots with their hands and they're walking them across leaves, and there's a guy with a microphone recording those things. So it's almost like that, but for the visual side, you got to do a little bit of that on site.
Yeah, those are the Foley guys. Yeah, that always looked like fun to me.
It's cool. So when you're working on a film, and I'm going to translate this to like animation cells, I think a lot of people have seen I don't know what the sheet's called, but essentially it lays out the entire episode frame by frame. Here's where the movements are, and it helps the animator to be able to put the shows together. Is it like that on a movie set? Is there basically a rundown, and then there's someone that just plots out every visual effect, and then you're following instructions on what goes where?
Sort of, yeah. So I think you're describing the storyboards, which don't break down like every moment in the film, but they kind of break down the beats, so like this happens, then this happens, then this happens. And then it gets further refined by the director and the cinematographer deciding, when shots will change and from what angles precisely and that sort of thing. But usually it's broken down to at least those beats to like what's going to happen one thing after another. And then when it comes to my job, which is we do preparation before the movie films. We're involved in production while it's filming, but most of the work happens after the fact in post-production. And then we're working on what was shot. and it's frame by frame, similar to animation. So whereas most American animation was shot or animated on twos, so you've got, roughly speaking, 12 frames per second. We generally work at 24 frames per second, so it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Going through an entire film frame by frame.
No kidding. It's almost like the old, when you see them when the artists were sketching on paper one after another, and they'd like put up one piece of paper and they go up and down, up and down. It almost like that digitally, for the sake you're going between frames, back and forth, and you're just making sure everything lines up perfect so it looks good when it's played at full speed.
Yeah, that's right.
That's really cool. Your collection is fantastic. And you mentioned Western animation, a lot of American cartoons that we see here. Is that what you primarily collect?
Yeah, that's right. So what you'll see on display here is essentially the American television cartoon. So these are cartoons meant for the American audience. Not all of them were produced in America, but generally intended for the American audience. There's a few that were originally intended for another audience, such as Japan, but then were imported here and were enough of an influence here that I included it. But most of them were intended for an American audience and were meant for television. That's another thing. So you won't see the theatrical shorts with Mickey Mouse or with Bugs Bunny or things like that. These are from cartoons that were specifically intended for television.
Do you get to learn the artist? When you look at a piece that you really like, do you go dig deeper and start to learn more about the people behind the cartoon?
Sure. I mean, as much as I can. It's, as I'm sure you're aware, it's really hard sometimes to find information on the specific artists involved, particularly with animation, because it's generally just credited to a studio. So trying to find information about the individual artists is sometimes just an impossible task. But as much as I can, I do try to find out the history of the piece and who was involved. And to a lesser extent with the animation, but with some of the other artwork, I've really made an effort to, whenever that artist can be found and is still with us, to track them down and contact them and get some backstory on the piece. I'll just kind of cold contact people and hope that they respond and just ask them, if there's any recollections they might have about the creation of the piece or what they were going through at the time, or any anecdotes at all about that moment in their life and how it came to be encapsulated in this piece that I now have in my collection. I think only adds to my interest and excitement with the pieces, to know a little bit of that backstory involved.
That's cool. I think that just looking at what's in frame now and what I know is an even larger wall, I think you've spent more money on framing than I have my entire collection. I mean, that's a lot. Do you frame your own work or do you take it into a professional to do it?
I've got a friend who's a professional framer. His name's Warren Craddock, Craddock Productions, and he does fantastic work. And he was very nice to help us prepare for the show. And yeah, it's as you can see, it was a lot of framing that needed to be done. Some of the other pieces, the larger ones, I already had framed, but the entire animation wall was unframed. So all of this had to be done before the show opened.
I got to tell you that just looking at this, I love that you can see where the background ends. So many times when you look at framed work, the mat cuts it off so it looks super clean. But I love to see the brush strokes end at a certain point and it's rough. I love that. I think that adds so much more to the artwork to it. So just looking at some of the pictures you have back there, it looks so awesome to notice that it's not all uniform. Each one's so unique and individual.
Yeah, thanks. I really made an effort with all the pieces in the show, but particularly the animation. I really wanted the entire piece represented. So I wanted to show the rips and the tears and the edges, and I wanted to show the registration holes and the little notes between animators and the codes and all of those bits and pieces that I think add to the enjoyment of the piece. I mean, they're a part of the history of the piece just as much as the subject is. And they show that, this is a handmade medium. This is something that was created by hand with a lot of effort from a lot of different people. And all those little things just showed that it wasn't a perfect thing. You kind of made things work just good enough for it to look good under camera, and then you moved on to the next thing.
There's been some pretty innovative techniques that animators used over the years that, make certain cartoons stand out. I once did a tour of the Neil Armstrong Museum with an astronaut, and the astronaut who was in space piloting, spaceships multiple times was going through and marveled at the technology and looked at it and said, I can't believe this is what they used to use. This is what we do now, but this is what they used to use. And it made him better appreciate, I think, the craft that he, uses now in his profession, I guess, as an astronaut. So for you, as a visual artist, do you go back and look at some of the techniques that some of these hand animators used? Does it help you better appreciate your field, and have you learned anything from them that, maybe a part of an art form that's been lost but shouldn't have been lost?
Yeah, for sure. I love that stuff, right? I love looking at the techniques that they used and the processes that they came up with, and more than anything, I love seeing what they were able to get away with. That sometimes today with digital stuff we're not. There's a tendency in modern filmmaking to want to make every pixel perfect. And if you look back at, a perfect example is some of the matte paintings that we have on display. They are not photoreal. If you look up close, there's big blobs of paint, and certain things are representative just by dabs of paint and a single brush stroke, and it's in a lot of ways very expressionistic, and that's not generally something that we can get away with these days, but I think it works just as well, and is fascinating to look at, especially up close in person.
It's because I'm not an artist. Sometimes I'll look at the way a certain cell was painted, and you'll see a straight line, and you'll think, if I were doing that, that line would be squiggling from cell to cell, because I couldn't do it the exact same way straight that would make it look good. And it just, I'm always marveling at the fact that the production could go through the illusion of the motion and not break that illusion because of little things like the line has to be perfect every single time for X amount of frames in a row. Because it's because, the old Dr. Katz had the squiggle vision in the 90s. That was an awesome show, but it was designed that way. But if you look at even some of the fine tuning, like I'm looking at some of the ones you have in the background from Rocco's Modern Life and Heifer, even like that strap that he has, that one suspender or whatever it is so small that I don't know how an artist could animate that over and over and over and over again without screwing it up. I marvel at little things like that.
Yeah. And just the economy of the animation as well. Like, he has no legs because they were going to be off camera.
Right. That's amazing to me. What's looking at some of the different pieces that you have on display, what's the reaction been so far? And the exhibit by itself, maybe people are within the general vicinity, they can come out and see it for themselves. So how can people actually see this?
Yeah, it's open to the public, and it's a free exhibition. It's here at a building on the University of Nebraska campus. It's part of the College of Fine and Performing Arts, and it's here, primarily to educate the public. It's meant to bring people in that maybe don't go to art museums that often, or just have an interest in movies or cartoons, or want to bring their kids to see what an animation cell is, or any of those reasons are valid. And anyone can come. The hours I don't know off the top of my head, but they're posted on the show's website, I'm sure.
Yeah. You think if you're a student, you're 18 years old, Do they realize this is the way animation was made just 20 years ago? Like, because a lot of ways what you see in digital animation is they mimic the old style. So it kind of makes it and gives it that feel. And it makes me wonder if a lot of times, if you're going into that specific field and you're maybe at the university, that they can go into it thinking everything's always been a computer. Like they just don't recognize this is the type of work that went into making a 30-minute cartoon, or the massive amount of work that went into it.
Yeah, there's definitely a wide section of the population, not just young folks, but just general and people in general that have never stopped to think that there ever was a physical object. I get that a lot with, there's a section devoted to comic book art. And it's just never occurred to anyone that there's an original page, and I really have to explain to them that they're not drawn comic book sized, they're drawn bigger and they're drawn on artboard or paper, and then that is reproduced and made into a printing plate. And you kind of have to explain the whole process to them, because there is a large portion of the population that just has never really stop to think about it. They enjoy the work. They may love cartoons. They may love comics or movies, but they've never given much interest to the secret sauce. What goes into it behind the scenes, and so it is kind of a shock for some people to see a physical object that has a character or a property that they have loved their whole life, and you can see them make the connection. So like when I watched the cartoon, this is what I saw, this is what I saw on screen. And it's really like a breakthrough moment sometimes with people when they realize they're in the presence of the thing that they watched when they were 6 years old.
Yeah.
It's kind of exciting.
It also reminds me too that you don't really remember sometimes the simplicity of some of these characters, where they're like, okay, they only used like 3 colors on this character, but in my memory, I never would have picked that up. It's amazing because they line it and you look at it and you're like, okay, in between these lines, it's almost like a coloring book. And they just do that over and over and over again. But in my mind, I remember there being a million colors, but really, characters just have like a couple colors.
Yeah, your mind kind of fills in those gaps, and sometimes it's prettier or smoother or more intricate in your mind's eye than it ever really was in reality. Like talking about the color reminded me of like Batman the Animated Series, for example. We think of it as this dark and moody show, with lots of environment and really dark colors and that sort of thing. And kind of infamously, their color palette was stolen directly from Tiny Toons Adventures, which was being made at the same time. And to save money, they were required to use the exact same paints that Tiny Toons were, which we think of as this bright, colorful show. So it's the exact same paints, just used in a very different way, which I think is fascinating.
I've heard stories where cartoon, over the course of a series, if it was a long running series, a company will go out of business that would make the paint for them, and they would try to find the exact same color and couldn't quite match it exactly because there was only one company that made that one color for them.
Yeah, forever. And I always liked how you would notice, at least as a kid, I would notice, and I wouldn't have an explanation for it because I didn't understand what was going on. But let's say in Scooby-Doo or something, there would be a secret door in the wall, and it would be a slightly different color than all of the other wall. And so you just knew that something was going to happen, in just a moment in that place. And it was just because the paint that was used for the acetate was different from the paint that used a watercolor background. So they couldn't match them precisely. And so someone paying attention was able to see like, oh, something's going to happen with that object, or, something like that. I always thought that was neat.
Yep. It was like the old Doom or Wolfenstein in the 90s. You just knew where the secret door was somehow because there was just a little something off. It didn't quite match. Oh, you're so right about the different colors of doors and objects. And that's pretty common. I mean, you see that in pretty much every cartoon. Um,
Yeah,
I'd love to see some of your favorites because there's so many up on the wall right now. Can we take
sure.
some closer looks at some of these?
Yeah, let's wander through and see some of the pieces.
Oh man, just I can just almost recognize. Oh, there's some on this other corner here I didn't get to see. Jetsons and Flintstones. Oh man, you got everything.
Yeah, so the way the wall here is arranged is chronological. So we start in 1959 with Yogi Bear, immediately followed by Flintstones, the very first primetime animated show, all the way to the very end over there, with the last ones being Ed, Ed and Eddie, and Samurai Jack, and shows like that. And at the very end here, there's a few in that awkward, like transitional period, like Samurai Jack, where the foregrounds had already switched to digital animation, but the backgrounds were still being painted by hand. So this is like one of the last examples where there was a physical object. This show here, Ed, Ed and Eddie, is the final show, the final major show to use cel animation, and they stopped in 2005 with cel animation.
Wow, amazing.
So it spans the entire lifetime of the TV cartoon, from 59 to 2005.
So let's go back to the start real quick because I want to see you have the Flintstones in their car.
Yeah, and so
that is like has to be a well sought after piece when you get vehicles like that. That's iconic.
yeah, I've made rules for myself with the collection that I try and stick to so that I don't just buy everything that I think is cool, because people go broke doing that sort of thing. So my rules with the animation is that I only buy one cel per show, which is why you see 90 different shows represented here. There's one per show. And so because I'm only getting one, I want it to be a representational example of that show. So you don't want the back of someone's head. You don't want just an arm or like a bird flying by. You want Fred Flintstone, right? Or you want Superman. You really want the lead characters in a iconic pose. So with the Flintstones, this is actually a replacement of what used to be my representation for the Flintstones, which was just Fred. But then, I found one with Fred, Barney, Wilma, and Betty, and in the car, no less. So it quickly replaced the other one. It's the best example I've seen of the show. It's a great cel, not only because it has everybody, but everybody's eyes are open. It's a great shot, perfectly centered. No one's missing a leg or a foot or anything like that. It's also from a famous episode. It's the Viva Rock Vegas episode. And the cool thing about Hanna-Barbera animation of that era is that when you buy cels like this that are kind of hero cels, they reuse them over and over. So just in that one episode alone, this cel gets used 5 times. So it's fun to frame through it and find each use. The other thing of note about the collection that you see here is that unlike most animation cels, every single one of these has the original hand-painted background. Whereas most cels that you see on the market or even in collections often have reproduction or laser copy backgrounds, every single one of these is an original hand-painted background. They're not all key master setups, so exactly as you saw on the screen, but they are all original and hand-painted.
So when you say original, is it original to the show, meaning that it would have been a background used on that particular show, or are you mixing and matching sometimes backgrounds because they, look nice?
They're whenever possible, they're from the show. I think there's probably, just off the top of my head, maybe 4 or 5 examples here with a non-matching background.
Right.
One example would be the Pink Panther here. So this is an example of a hand painted background, but it is not matching to this specific short that Pink Panther is from, and may not in fact even be from Pink Panther. I'm not sure. But like Super Friends here is a Keymaster setup. So all cells match together, and it's the background that was also used in not only in the show, but in the scene as well.
That is cool. So who's your best friend? Is it Heritage Auctions? Like, who do you normally find these? Because when you're talking about particularly well sought after background, like when you're talking Superman in that pose, that's iconic. That's got to be something that an auction house would have, or are you just lucky enough to come across these things in the wild?
Yeah, it's a mixture of both, right? It's the collection didn't happen overnight. I've been collecting for about 25 years, and it really takes a lot of effort to track these things down. There's shows that I would just love to have represented. A perfect example is Rocky and Bullwinkle. I don't have an example from them. I have seen cels for sale from Rocky and Bullwinkle, but they have. I've never found one that meets the rules, right? That has the background and is like A+ example of the characters. So I don't have it, but I'm playing the long game, right? So maybe in 5, 10, 20 years, I'll find the one finally. But yeah, in a lot of cases, it's from auctions. That's where you find the A+ examples as opposed to somebody's arm or something. But also from other collectors. I've bought a number of pieces from other collectors, and just word of mouth, asking around. I've pried a few pieces out of other people's collections that they didn't want to sell, but I could. Things like that. There's I always have like a most wanted list where I'm trying to find examples of this and this and this, and so I do the research and check around to see who has what, see what's affordable and, and all of that.
So
it's a challenge.
Going down the line, Smurfs, Pac-Man. What's underneath Pac-Man?
Inspector Gadget is.
I have to take a look at that if you can. Oh, that's so cool. It's hard to find Inspector Gadget stuff.
It's real, yeah.
I only see them once in a while. And once they do crop up, they're normally not that great of a sell. Sometimes you find a really good one, but that's beautiful. So, which goes to show you sometimes there's really rare shows where they just did not release it or they just destroyed it, and very few are out there in circulation.
Yeah, it's really surprising sometimes which shows are extremely hard to find, and for exactly that, a lot of times the whole stock was just destroyed or lost. Maybe it's in a warehouse somewhere, but there just aren't examples on the market, and so finding not only any example but one that meets my specifications is really hard sometimes. Sometimes I get lucky, like the Muppet Babies here. This is one that a lot of people recognize because it's from one of the title cards at the very end of the episode.
Oh.
So this would have the credits over the top. But this was displayed in not quite every episode because they changed those cards at some point, but of a majority of the episodes, you can see this particular cel.
Wow. So just in general, when they're used in that fashion, are all the characters on one cel, or are that a multi-cel setup?
Yeah. In this case, all those characters are on one cel, and then the background is a construction of multiple elements. So Mona Lisa is a reproduction, like on paper. That's been adhered to a board that's pasted onto the watercolor board, and then the ground is painted on another thing. So it's like a whole assemblage of different things to make this one image.
Wow, that is so cool. Heathcliff, is that what's right above them?
Yeah, that's right. And that's actually a great example of one that I'm still looking to upgrade, for lack of a better word, because it's a great shot of the Cadillac Cats character, but it's not a shot of Heathcliff.
Yeah.
And I would really prefer that it be Heathcliff. So someday it will be, but for now, this is.
Oh man. And then I can G.I. Joe's next to him.
Yeah, Destro here, and My Little Pony and Mask.
Oh, Mask. But with the Destro, like, was that Hasbro or whoever put that out? It's hard to find the original G.I. Joes again. Those are some really rare ones.
Yeah, it's really hard. And this is a great one. It's a Keymaster setup. It's the original background. And the wall in front of Destro is painted on a cel separate from Destro himself. And it's from an episode that I remembered very distinctly from my own childhood, with Destro's family being involved in some sort of weird underground cult, and the Joes have wandered into this mansion and found these secret passageways and found them having some sort of ritual down in this cave, and make a noise, and then Destro sees them and chases them. It was kind of a typical G.I. Joe episode, but it's really struck out in my mind as a kid because it was so dark. It was this weird like cult that he was in, and they were wearing animal masks and chanting, and it was, really scary, for a kid's cartoon. And then that I happened to find a cel from that particular episode was just something I couldn't resist.
So when you have those memorable moments, are you able to search a moment that you want to purchase and find it, or are you basically at the mercy of what's available and you stumble upon it?
Always at the mercy of what's available. So there are great examples that are available all the time. There's heritage auctions seemingly every day these days. They really happen like 3 times a year or something, but it seems to happen a lot, and there's always something cool out there. But with all collectors, you have to gauge what's right for your collection, and pick and choose what's going to be the best choice for me at this time.
Yeah. Okay. So of course the Ghostbusters and Care Bears, and then you have DuckTales, which can I look at that DuckTales? Can we zoom in on that?
Sure. This is one of the episodes that was adapted straight from one of the comics, and it's where they go and encounter the Yeti, and
yes,
so I think they're in Antarctica or something like that. And I wish I knew which duckling that is. I don't, because you usually are able to tell Huey, Dewey, and Louie by the colors, right? The red, or green and blue. But he's in this parka, and I have no idea which one it is.
Well, it's so funny. Even if you were to find the episode, like you'd be able to tell by their voice. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I have. I've watched this scene over and over and over again, trying to determine which nephew that is, and I just can't figure it out. So
it's a dealer's choice. You get to pick.
Yeah.
Oh man, Back to the Future there. Is there a Simpsons somewhere close?
Yeah, so if you come down here to the bottom, there's an A++ example of the Simpsons, like the best I could ever hope for.
Oh, is that like a season 1?
This is season 1, episode 4, where they go in for family counseling and end up electrocuting one another.
Right.
And it's a Keymaster setup. Everything's original and exactly as you see on screen. And it's got all 5 family members, full-bodied. Everyone's eyes are open. Of this particular piece, the provenance is amazing. So this piece was owned by Sam Simon, the co-creator of the show. And it hung on his office wall for whatever it was, 30 years or something, until his passing. And then I purchased it from the estate. So it's I'm the second owner of this piece. Wow. Directly after the creator of the show.
That is so cool. And that meant something to him if that's the one he chose to put up on the wall.
So he's the guy who helped create the show. He has access to any cel he could possibly want from the entire show. And this is the one he picked.
Wow.
Which I think is just incredible.
Look at those fry marks.
Yeah.
That is really cool. Oh, you have the Garfield. That's cool. And then Ren and Stimpy. There's a lot of those that sell online. Ren and Stimpy. They're very popular. The Nickelodeon shows seem to have done a great job archiving their work and making it
Yeah.
available to the public.
And they're another one to look out for with the backgrounds again, because exactly like you said, you can find the cells quite often, but finding the complete setup is tough. This is from the very first episode when Stimpy
Wow.
goes to Hollywood and Ren is left at home alone and is slowly losing his mind by himself.
That is cool. I might have been mistaken. I said Back to the Future. Is that a Captain N? That's kitty corner to it, or did I get them wrong?
Both. So Captain N is here, and Back to the Future is up here.
Gotcha. Okay, because that's what I saw before, and I when you went a little bit closer, that one varsity jacket is very similar. It throws you off.
Right, the red, like quasi life preserver jacket.
Yeah. Almost looks similar. Oh man, is that the Batman one you're talking about?
Yep. So this is from my favorite episode, Heart of Ice. It was the first introduction to Mr. Freeze, and it's just a phenomenal episode. I think it's generally considered, everybody's favorite episode from the show. And just like a great shot of Batman just about to kick the camera, basically. I couldn't hope for a better one from that. And
That
in
is
fact,
cool.
this replaced a previous example I had. And then right below it is one I love to point out. It's from, the exact opposite, right? Everybody knows Batman and nobody knows what show this is. It's Dog City, which was a Jim Henson cartoon. And it's, I think, for my money, it's one of the best examples in this whole collection of what I'm looking for in a setup. It's a complete Keymaster setup. Everything matches. It's got the main character front and center, right out in front in a great pose, kind of oblivious to what's going on. And then it also tells a story. Like it has the bad guys, the henchmen, driving the truck and going to hit the oblivious hero. And it's a whole, almost like a comic strip. It's a whole story in one image, which is, I love that sort of thing with the physical pieces. You want something that is interesting to look at on its own, right? You don't want just something that is important because of which episode it was in or something like that. You want something that also looks good on the wall and is exciting to look at as its own standalone piece of art. And
Can I say
exactly that?
I'm a sucker for a cityscape background when it shows buildings and they're in like a downtown area. I'm a sucker for that because I just think the artwork's always so beautiful when there's buildings and businesses in the background. Plus, you get the street and the crosswalk with that one. That is so nice.
Yeah, I love that.
Right next to it, the Beavis and Butthead. I've seen that background copied an awful lot. Normally, it's them on a riding lawnmower. I've seen that sold a bunch of times. That one right there.
I have as well. Yeah, and this is not one of those. This is the original.
What does that say? 99-cent gas. Oh, the days.
The days. Yeah. The Rocco one that you pointed out. This is from what became sort of a notorious episode that had, at the very least, had some editing done, and in some cases was banned entirely because they've gone off on an adventure to a farm, and Heifer has made some friends with some farm cows. And here he's begging Rocco to brand him so that he'll fit in with his new friends. But the really the thing that got the episode in trouble was at one point Heifer gets milked, and of course Heifer is not a girl, so that was something they snuck past the censors, I think.
That is so great. What's your thoughts on the stickers? Because a lot of the Nickelodeon shows have stickers on them. Does that Rocco have a sticker on it? I'm just not seeing.
It doesn't. It has some. Oh, sorry, it does. Yeah, it has the seal up here. The
Oh,
nickel.
gotcha. So are you
But then it also
normally?
has stickers around the registration marks. And
Oh,
things.
gotcha. Like for the seal, do you normally stick to ones that could be authenticated through the seal, or are you also purchasing ones that normally would have a seal but don't have them?
The seal makes no difference to me. I actually kind of prefer it if they don't have the seal. I'm not personally concerned about buying something fake because I really always do my research and figure out whether it's legit or not. And to me, the seal sometimes makes it more of an object than a piece of art. So I'm not a huge fan of the seals personally, but I also don't remove them. I want to leave it as is.
Right.
Leave it on. It's Warner Brothers has their seals as well, and a lot of studios do. But I generally prefer that they be pristine to how it appears under camera.
Yeah.
In the show itself.
Man, you got so much here. Nickelodeon had some great shows for a long time. And then, yeah, the Warner Brothers stuff. So that's so I saw the Goof Troop that was back there, which was a really nice one. And then that's Disney, of course, but the Animaniacs that you have close to it, that is well sought after too. People love collecting the Animaniacs.
Yeah, and this is, if you look really close, and I mean really close, it also has Pinky and the Brain in the little cage that's on the desk there. Because this cell is from the introductory animation, like the front titles. And what's really fascinating about this is that all of that, including the background, is on one cell. They repainted that entire background cell by cell because it's this huge camera move as the camera's backing out from the image. So every frame had to be slightly different.
Wow, that's amazing.
Definitely money they spend on the intro, but not on the episode.
Well, the episodes look great too.
Yeah, true. Well, and then Pinky and the Brain eventually got their own show, and here's
right.
an example of that.
Well sought after and loved as well. I see there's an Iron Man there, Street Sharks. There's, let's see, Johnny Bravo. Oh man, I love a good Johnny Bravo. I don't personally have one, but I definitely am going to get one at some point. Those are cool animation cells.
It's great, and it's right in this era where it's starting to get really difficult to find the original backgrounds and to even have a physical foreground. The creator of the show saw some footage of the exhibit here and commented that he was glad to be represented in the collection, and that's super cool. To get that little bit of recognition from one of the creators. It's really
that is so cool. There's a show I've been looking for years and haven't been able to find. Recess from Disney. Have you ever seen a Recess cell?
No, I haven't. There's a number of those that I have not been able to find. One on my must-have list is Daria from MTV.
Wow.
I would love a Daria cell, and I've never seen a single one for sale. And it's really made me question sometimes whether they exist at all, whether it was all digital. But the research that I've done tells me that at least the first season or two were done traditionally. But yet I've never seen a single cell for sale, whether it meets my requirements or not. Like no cells whatsoever. I've never seen.
Yeah, and I've seen that character in Beavis and Butthead cells.
Yeah,
that's popped up.
Yeah.
What's that movie with the clown in the sewer? Is that it?
It.
So you're walking down LA Street, and then you notice a clown in a sewer and says, "Hey, I have some Daria cells down here. Are you hopping down to take a look?"
I've seen it enough. And in fact, I worked on one of the new movies. So I think I can let that cell go. I don't need that one.
What do we have up? Is there Tick that up a couple?
Yep, that's right. The Tick.
Oh, cool.
The Tick and Arthur there.
That's awesome. And what's to the right? Is that another Batman?
It is. It's kind of a cheat because, right, I said I only have one per show, but technically this is a different show. So this is the new Batman Adventures. When they transitioned from Batman the Animated Series to the new Batman Adventures, they redesigned the characters, they redesigned the animation process, and some of the creative staff changed. And so it really is a different show. Just looking at his costume, there's big differences.
Wow.
So
And then
I wanted to make sure that both were represented.
and to the right of that, is that just a background cell?
That's
Or
right.
background?
So this is from a show called The Oblongs, and by this point, all of the foreground work on the show was done digitally. So only the background exists.
That's a cool technique. I never really thought that, because once in a while you hear how some of the old Disney movies used a little bit of both.
Yeah.
And then you have Dexter's Lab. Oh man, some of these Cartoon Network stuff, they're super cool.
Yeah. Like SpongeBob down here at the very bottom. That's a good example of the transition, right? So only the first season had cels. After that, they switched to digital. So if you see one, then that means it's from very early.
Wow. I got to tell you, this is so impressive. All of this is just such a cool thing. It's almost like if there's something that I watched as a kid, it's up on that wall somewhere. That's amazing.
Cool, right? I really wanted to, not just the shows that I watched, but I wanted to have the impossible goal of one cell from every show that's ever existed. So it's a mission that, can last a lifetime and can never really be achieved.
Yeah.
But it's something fun to shoot for, right?
What did I hear about the King of the Hill cells? So they started using cells and the studio started to release them. And then they just said, nope, we changed our mind. So they're holding on to them and not releasing them. But there are a couple out there that were at least sold when they were more friendly. I hope they open up that floodgate again. I'd love to get a King of the Hill.
I would too. That's definitely one that I would love to have represented on the wall. And you are able to find from time to time the pencils, the key animation pencil backgrounds, but it's really hard to find the cels, like you said. And I've never seen one that's complete, a keymaster setup.
Wow, this is amazing. When you're back home, do you normally keep them on display like this?
This is the first time the collection as a whole has ever been displayed all at once. So when I first started collecting animation many years ago, my initial humble goal was to have a small grid of like this of whatever it was, like 8 or 9 cels of the shows that were most important to me growing up. And then as I got more and more into it, then it became, one from every show, not just the ones I grew up with. And it's become, a giant grid instead of the little grid. But it's exciting when I started putting this exhibit together with the gallery curator. Her name is Emma DeVries. I left most of it open to her in terms of what could be used in the show. I presented the collection to her, and she picked and chose what she thought was most beneficial, and she designed the entire exhibit and really did a fantastic job. But the one thing that I really wanted to emphasize was that I wanted the animation presented in a chronological grid. That was always my dream, and so it's been really exciting to actually see it in person. In this chronological grid. It's really cool.
That is so cool. When you have a collection a size like this, do you have any difficulty with the preservation of the cels? Have you ever had issues where cels start to either go bad or, because you hear the stories about people that store them for a long time and the gases build up and it basically denigrates the cel to a point of no return. Have you ever had issues with that?
I've been lucky and I haven't really had issues of deterioration while they've been in my care. I definitely have pieces that are in better shape than others, but they came to me that way. I'm really careful with how they're handled, how they're displayed. Everything is obviously acid free and UV protected, and as much as one can do without sealing it away where it can't be enjoyed. Ultimately, I feel that art is meant to be on display, and nothing is meant to last forever, and so it's better to display them and have them slowly die over a very long period of time, hopefully, rather than hide them forever down in a file cabinet.
Yeah.
That's my opinion, but go ahead.
For insurance purposes, did you ever have to assess the value of your collection?
Yeah. I've taken out its own policy on the whole collection.
Okay, because that's smart. When you get a collection that size, did it surprise even you? You're like, wow, I can't believe I've spent this much money over the years.
Yeah, it's kind of painful sometimes. When you look at the numbers involved, you're like, oh man, really? And sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes I go back and I have to reevaluate. In fact, for this exhibition, I have to go back and reevaluate everything. I keep diligent records of where I bought it, who I bought it from, how much I paid, every circumstance surrounding its purchase. And then I also keep track of, which episode it was from, what the time code is, scene number, everything I can about the piece. I keep diligent records, and because of that, I can see, what I paid for pieces at various times, and that's actually been a good thing sometimes, because you see what things used to sell for, and you're like, wow, I got that for that. I would pay 10 times that now. And it's fun to see what felt very painful back then is now considered really cheap. So it goes both ways.
That's interesting. I have seen that. Like, for example, they said that with the Simpsons cels, you used to be able to get them on the lot for like $100. And, if you worked for them or whatever it was, and now they're $700 to $1,500, $2,000, some cases or whatever. And then some of them, they look at it when this became a hot commodity, animation cels or whatever. Some of them, they bought stuff from Disney that just didn't keep up the value. If, non-iconic things, they bought them because it was something that, it was almost like the comic book bust, where, that one Superman comic book #1 sells for millions of dollars, and everyone thinks, wow, there's a ton of value in comic books, and everyone way overpaid for collectible comic books. And then they find out later that they didn't keep their value. Cels kind of went through an ebb and flow like that too.
Yeah, the speculator market. It happens with every collectible, right? Eventually, someone in the market for a cheap investment finds it and spreads the word, and people start buying it without really understanding what they're buying, or what makes an A+ caliber piece versus a C+ piece, or things like that. They really just don't understand the complexities that are involved with buying art, which is just by necessity a one-of-one item. Every piece is unique, so every piece has its own considerations, and that's difficult to convey to someone who's just in it for the money. And a lot of people get swept up in that, and they end up with things that they don't really understand, and they thought were going to be worth a lot of money, and they're really not.
Yeah.
And there's really no avoiding that. Same thing has happened with sports cards and comic books, and you name it. There's been a speculator surge at some point. And,
oh yeah. Well, I guess that in the field you're in, there would be a higher chance that you meet another person that collects animation cels. Have you met another person in your profession that collects?
I have, yeah. I've met a few people in the profession. I tend to find people that are, at least in my profession, more interested in the other artwork in the exhibition, the film concept pieces and things like that, because we're in film. But from time to time, I meet somebody that's a fellow cel collector, and it's always fun to talk about it with somebody that knows the struggles that I do.
You're on eBay 5 times a day.
Right.
So you're not just collecting animation cells. From what I understand, the exhibit actually has other forms of production art, which by itself, this is incredibly impressive. And this is just a portion of what you're showing off, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. Do you want to take a wander through?
Yeah, let's do a walkthrough. That'd be awesome.
We'll do a quick little walkthrough here. So over in this corner, we've got things related to advertising. And right away, you'll see some other animation cells. These are all from cereal commercials. And just like the others, these are all Keymaster setups for the most part. This is an example that's not the background is from the same commercial as the foreground, but at the moment that the foreground appears in the commercial, it's over live action footage. And the background actually appears earlier in the episode. So there is no background for the foreground. So I merged them, but they are from the same commercial at least. I've always been fascinated with the cereal commercials. It's just something so indicative of American culture. I think, it's this, these bright, colorful kids characters meant to sell an infinite variety of flour, corn, and sugar, right? Just this whole aisle of flour, corn, and sugar represented by these cartoon characters, which I love. There's a lot of history with these too. This is a great example. You'll see that Toucan Sam here with Fruit Loops is in many ways much more intricate than some of the other commercials around it. And the artist who painted this is Toby Bluth, the brother of Don Bluth, who famously did movies like The Secret of Nim and An American Tail, and you name it. Both of whom were former Disney animators, and then they went rogue and split off and created their own studio. And this is an example from Toby Bluth.
That's awesome. So that's part of it. Yeah, you have other things in your collection too, you said.
That's right. Yeah. So this is an example of a matte painting. So matte paintings are historically used to do a big establishing shot in a film. You think of a movie like Spartacus, where you see Rome, and it's much too big to build an entire replica of Rome. So they cheat and they use a painting. And usually they'll insert a small amount of live action footage so the audience believes that the characters were there. But in reality, it's just a painting. And this was a commercial for the grand opening of Euro Disney, as it was called at the time. Now it's Disneyland Paris. But this was a overhead flyover shot through some clouds with Mickey and Donald and maybe Goofy, I can't remember, like sky surfing, because it was the 90s, through the clouds and over the park. And of course, if you take live action footage of the park, you get all of the things that aren't so pretty, like air conditioners and dumpsters and things the audience in the park is not meant to see. But if you do it as a painting like this, suddenly you can make everything look just as picture perfect as you want it to be. So that's why they did it this way.
That's cool. I guess I've never really considered that. And I've never really, I think, seen one that is super cool. And it's hyper realistic.
Yeah, they're traditionally painted on glass. And this one is painted on glass.
Oh.
They're done in oils. And then a portion of the painting would be traditionally painted black. And then that's where the live action footage would get inserted. This one didn't have any live action footage, so it doesn't have any black areas. But
why would they paint it on glass? What's the advantage?
It allowed for lots of different movie making tricks, right? You can backlight it. You can put lights through little things that you've left clear. You can layer images just like an animation cell. You can have bits behind it moving to fool the viewer's eye into thinking there's movement when there's not. There's a lot of things that you can do with a piece of glass that you can't do if it's solid.
That's interesting. Just the flickering of a light, and stuff like that makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow, that is cool.
Over here, there's original paintings from the Garbage Pail Kids series. So the trading cards that a lot of us got in trouble with at school when in the 80s. These are the paintings that would then be reproduced and shrunk down to trading card size and used as the covers to those cards.
So this is the original work that was used for the cards?
That's right. Yep. These
Oh,
are the
wow.
original.
Those cards are selling like crazy on eBay right now.
They are. It's really seen a bit of a renaissance lately, and they still make Garbage Pail Kids. What was originally a parody of Cabbage Patch Kids has outlasted the thing that it was parodying, which is, says a lot about the artistry involved. These were all painted by a man named John Pound, who's become quite famous for his work.
The description you have there, did you write each description for each piece?
No, so I worked with Emma, and then also a student actually who was conducting a series of interviews with me, and then also doing her own research to write all of the informational text that we have throughout the show. Daniela was her name, and she did a fantastic job. Here we have representations from theme parks. So what you see here is a concept for one of Walt Disney's contributions to the 1964 World's Fair, where Walt was commissioned to do 4 of the pavilions, and this is for one of them. It was for the Ford Pavilion. And that then resulted in a number of things that everybody knows and loves today, like It's a Small World was one of the pavilions. And the ride mechanism that was developed on this ride became the ride mechanism that was used in things like the Haunted Mansion.
Wow. That is cool.
And then over here, this is a painting when they were developing Epcot Center in the late 70s, early 80s. This was for a portion of ride in the Land Pavilion in Epcot Center. And like most of the work here, this is something that they developed along the way to help guide colors and themes and emotions and things that they were trying to evoke, but wasn't necessarily meant to be viewed as a singular piece of art like we're looking at it. And that was one of my goals of this exhibit, is to showcase work like this by artists that many people may not know, whose work is often unheralded, that this sort of thing doesn't usually get seen very often.
Wow. Does your frame guy, did he do that too?
This is actually by a different frame guy in Los Angeles. He goes by the Framing Devil, who also does an amazing job.
That is, because the piece is amazing. And I'm admiring the framework too. Man, is that how they've had to put that together? That takes some skill to frame something like that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's sometimes really hard to find a frame that that both looks beautiful but doesn't detract from the piece or pull attention from the piece. And that's always what I try to do. I try to keep them pretty neutral, so that they don't overshadow the piece, but still you want it to add beauty to what you're displaying.
Wow, this is so cool. It's got to be weird to walk through your collection.
It's a lot of fun. It's really cool to be able to do that. If we go in this room.
Yeah.
There's a number of pieces that are animation related. These are concept paintings and drawings from animated films, mostly, not entirely, but mostly. So this is a concept painting from Roger Rabbit. This is Toontown at night, and it's meant to develop the way that Toontown will look. No straight lines, everything is curved. The way that everything is a character. The fire hydrant is alive. Even the brick walkway here is alive. Lots of cool details while they're developing the look of the film. And if you look close to, there's a wanted sign on the police station for Bugs Bunny. I don't know what he did. This is from Cinderella. So this is a Disney artist by the name of Mary Blair. She was one of Walt Disney, the man, not the company's favorite artists. He had her involved in as many projects as he could, basically, because he loved her, not only her sense of style, but really also her color palette. He relied on her heavily to choose color palettes for the films and for the projects that he was working on.
Wow, that's cool. For some reason, I always imagine those to be larger, the concept art. Like that seems small.
They vary a lot. Some are small, some are quite large. There's a piece over here from the film The Black Hole, which was another Disney film. This is by an artist named Peter Ellenshaw, who actually is most known as a matte painter. Those giant paintings on glass that we looked at. That's what he's primarily known for, but he also did concept design, and this was a piece for the Black Hole, which he worked on with his son, actually, Harrison Ellenshaw, who also is a amazing matte painter in his own right. Oops, sorry.
Wow, there's a lot of little details in that.
There's a piece here from The Lion King, which is fascinating as an animation cel aficionado, because it's painted on a cel. Lion King had no cels. It was done digitally. But in this concept phase, many of the artists still would work traditionally because that's what they were most comfortable with. And to evoke the same feel of cel animation, they just simply did that. They just painted the concept directly on a cel. But unlike traditional animation, where the black lines are transferred to the cel and then the paint is applied to the back, this was painted entirely on the front of the cel because it was never intended to be photographed for the film.
Right. Wow. That's amazing. Man, there's some really talented artists.
That's the truth, right? And so many of these artists are amazingly talented, and yet, the general public doesn't know their work, doesn't know their names, and that's one of the reasons why this exhibit is here. This is a piece by Ivan Earl for Sleeping Beauty, and this concept was actually used twice. It was used for the film and then also for the castle walkthrough attraction that's in Disneyland. There's some scenes of the film on display in kind of these like window box arrangements, and this is one of the scenes on display. So it was reused. If we travel over here, there's a few really big matte paintings, all that were actually used in film. And there's maybe a great example here of that area that's painted black, like I mentioned. So this is from Star Trek: The Motion Picture, 1979. And this is a moment when Captain Kirk and Spock and the rest of the crew are exiting the Starship Enterprise, and they're walking out actually on the hull of the ship toward camera. And so the live action footage of the actors walking on a surface would be placed here, and the rest of the environment is just this painting.
So would it be like a green screen type of deal where they would have part of the set built, but only that small, narrow window of it, and that's what they would superimpose?
Sort of, yeah. They would. There wouldn't necessarily be any reason to put in a blue screen or green screen because they never intended to have the rest of it shown. But they only had to build enough set to fill this area, and they knew that the rest would be painting. So the set that you would see them on would quickly turn into scaffolding and planks of wood as soon as it's out of view of the camera.
It's magic.
Yeah. This great big one here is from the movie Chaplin with Robert Downey Jr. And there was just a tiny little bit here that you can see in the glass where this is where the live action would be placed. And in this scene, there Robert Downey Jr.'s character is with Kevin Kline's character, and they're I think having a toast on the letter O of the Hollywood sign. And then the camera slowly pulls out, and you see, where they are, and the entire rest of the scene is a painting. Only that tiny little bit on the O was live action.
Oh, wow. Again, that's magic. That's tricking the eye that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, it's all trick, right? And that's what we still do today. We're trying to convince the audience that what they saw, really existed or could have existed, and really they're just looking at, blobs of paint or pixels falling out.
Wow, this is an amazing collection. How do you even find a piece like this? Is it sometimes the movie studios themselves will auction things off, or is this from like a different private collector who just so happened to work on the film and got to keep it or something?
It's a mixture still. So usually the studios have a permanent collection that they don't let go. So usually the things that the studio has kept, they keep forever. The pieces that sneak out are things that people that worked on them have been allowed to keep, or maybe an actor has been allowed to keep. There's a piece over here. This is from Dances with Wolves. And this one I bought directly from the artist. So my first job in the industry was as a matte painter. And so I've always had a fondness for matte painting, and I'm aware of, and have favorite matte painters and things. And a few of them are still working. This gentleman's name is Rocco Joffrey, and he's still a working matte painter and does great work. And I just contacted him and asked him, do you still have any paintings from back in the day? And if you do, can I look at them? And even better yet, can I buy one from you? And he was willing to at least talk about it. And I went to his studio and got the personal tour of everything that he still had, and convinced him to let me have the piece from Dances with Wolves.
Awesome. That is so cool. That's got to be difficult for you to go into a studio, meet the artist, and immediately you have to be overwhelmed because of just you're surrounded by all of this great artwork of something that you collect. How hard is it for you to control yourself, and keep composure in moments like that?
Yeah, I've thankfully been trained, with my job. I'm often around film sets, and there's people that I grew up idolizing, and it's very unprofessional to let that be known in any way. So I've got to biting my tongue and just, playing it cool, trying to pretend like I'm professional, at least on the outside. And it's the same thing, you especially in a case where you're trying to buy things, you don't want to show all your cards, you got to keep the poker face up. There is an element of negotiation that will have to happen and all of that, but it's, I think, most fulfilling when you can buy a piece, directly from the artist, because then I know that they're the one getting the money, and I can talk to them directly about, their history with it and learn about it. And I love that when it works out that way.
You know what? It's that old show. I don't think they make it anymore. American Pickers. You're American Art Pickers. You go through. Right. Can I come take a look at your stuff? You're making offers on it. Do you ever get to, working on movie sets? Do they ever say something like, "Oh yeah, you can take that if you want it"? Is there anything does that ever happen to you?
That never happens. I think studios wised up to the value of their items many, many years ago, and they no longer just give things out like that. If I were Robert Downey Jr., I might be able to walk out with something, but me, not so much. So No, I don't. I don't get freebies, unfortunately.
Yeah.
There's a few additional pieces in here. If you're a child of the '80s, you may remember Choose Your Own Adventure books.
Yeah.
And this is the cover painting to one of those Choose Your Own Adventure books. Also painted by an artist who's also a matte painter. There's a lot of crossover in the collection between the work that's shown and who did it. It's in a lot of cases it's the same people. This is a piece from a comic series based on the Aliens films. This was the cover to issue 2 of Aliens. And it's the only piece, I think, in the collection that's primarily done with airbrush. So it has a very kind of unique look and style to it that I've always really appreciated.
That is cool.
There's a piece here from Ghostbusters and another from the Goonies. You can kind of tell where my nostalgia sweet spot is based on the selection of movies, right? I grew up mostly in the 80s, and so One-Eyed Willie's ship is something really iconic from.
Oh, sure it is.
And with most collectors, I think we're primarily motivated by nostalgia, right? So you're trying to recreate or capture a portion of that memory or that feeling.
Oh yeah. Well, it brings you a certain feeling, the feeling that it gave you when you first consumed, and that feeling can, easily be resparked by a picture or something along those lines, and it feels good.
Yeah. It's really exciting sometimes when you find a piece and you're just like, I remember this moment, or there's a piece here in the comics. These are original pages from comic books, and this exact page came out, I think, when I was 13. I was certainly in junior high. And I remember buying the issue off the stand. It's from a comic called The Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix. It's an X-Men related book. And it was the first time I remember, and it really sticks out in my mind, where I flipped to this page and I was struck by just the art. I was amazed at how intricate and detailed it was, and the colors that they used and all of that. And it's the first time I remember not just reading the comic book for the story, but really like, wow, this is amazing artwork. And I was so excited by it. I took it to school and I showed my friends, like, look at this page, isn't this awesome? And I don't think anybody was quite as interested as I was, but it always stuck with me. And then decades later, after I had been, collecting all of this for a while, I happened upon this original at San Diego Comic-Con, actually, in a pile of original artwork for sale. And I just couldn't give the guy my money fast enough. I was so excited to find that page. But I kept a poker face. I didn't tell him that it was, my so iconic to me, but I got it nonetheless. The original comic pages are so cool. Just the production involved with them. It has to go from artist to artist to artist to artist. The penciler works on it first, and then the inker, and then the letterer, and then the colorist, and before anybody, you've got the writer. So it has to go through all of these hands, and yet they have to pump out 22 of these every month, to have one issue a month. And the idea that they get done at all, or that any of them are any good, is kind of a miracle. Have so many people involved, and then to do it on that timetable is really impressive.
Wow. That's amazing.
There's kind of a crown jewel of the collection here, which is a concept drawing from Return of the Jedi, Star Wars pieces, as you can imagine, are highly sought after. And,
Oh, sure. Look at that.
this is by one of, if not the most sought after artists. His name's Ralph McQuarrie, who was the lead designer for all of the original films, but then also was a matte painter on the films and did a number of other duties on the films. But this is some of his designs for the A-Wing fighter.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, the Star Wars stuff. People, it draws a headline whenever there's something up for an auction and there's something Star Wars in it, original to the movie.
Yeah,
That's interesting too, the way that's designed. So that's concept art for one of the spaceships,
yeah. So
and they have
it's-
it under black background because obviously it's in space, so you want to see what it looks like behind black. And
Yes,
it's
exactly.
kind of, it's interesting. It's like everything's boxed out in a way. Even that's designed uniquely.
Yeah, he's already, even at this early stage, he's working on framing and what it will look like at, close-ups and wide angles and, profile versus straight on and all of those different considerations, when you're designing something for a film. It's, with a film, it's all about how it looks, right? It doesn't matter if it could conceivably actually work or not. That's irrelevant. It just needs to look good from every angle and meet whatever goal the director happens to have for this particular element. And so you really have to look at it from all those different angles and under different lighting conditions and all of those sorts of things. Like another example is the goblins here from Labyrinth, which is a Jim Henson film.
Yeah.
There are a lot of goblins in the film, and there's lots of different designs. So there's this is a page from the artist's sketchbook where he did hundreds of designs of different goblins, and some of them got used in the film, and others didn't. He'll walk through all of these concepts with the director, and in this case, Jim Henson will say, "Oh, I like that one. I like that one. I like that one." And pick out the things that he liked, or he may say, "I like what you did with the horns, but I really like this face. Let's put these two together." Things like that, and collaborate with the artist to come up with what the final looks are.
It's amazing. All of these different pieces. You find normally that if someone collects one certain production art, they normally stick to that one thing, but you have a wide variety of interest in so many different, like the range of the things you collect that are under the umbrella of this production art. It's really fascinating to me that you didn't focus on just one thing, that you really wanted a wide range of things.
Yeah, and it all, like you said, it all falls under that umbrella of production art. But there's lots of different facets to that. Some of it gets used in the final product, like the commercial cels or the animation cels or the matte paintings. Or even the comic book art. And then there's a lot of pieces, the concept pieces and the paintings for the theme parks and things that are just a stepping stone along the way. But they're all something that has contributed to that final product. That's how I justify it to myself anyway, in how to include everything. But you're right. Yeah, it's a wide ranging collection. That's for sure.
Does this mean you collect nothing else? Like you don't have like a shoe collection on top of this, do you?
No, I do actually have other collections as well, but this one is kind of my main. It has been my main focus for a number of years. There's a comic book called Spawn that you may have heard of. That I don't think I have the largest collection in the world, but I do have one of the most complete collections in the world of Spawn memorabilia.
Interesting.
But that's a whole nother show.
No kidding. Yeah. Were they going to reboot it? Because they came out with that, was it 90s movie? They had a Spawn movie.
There was a movie in 97. Say what you will about that. And then they've been, the creator, Todd McFarlane, he's been working on trying to get a new film off the ground for
Right.
quite and it hasn't materialized yet, but I do know that he's still working on it from time to time. So,
Well, like the McFarlane figures are like the top of the top. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
yeah, and that's a large portion of that collection is those figures. But yeah, they're with any collection, it's sometimes difficult to find the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you really have to kind of choose what you're going to focus on, and so for quite some time now, the artwork has been my focus.
Well, I mean, people collect in different ways. I've noticed some people liked one specific show and they collect a lot of that show for animation cells. Some like, certain varieties, some like just things because they look nice. Some people only do Japanese anime, others only do Western animation, some only do movies, some only do Disney. It's really amazing the way that you laid it out, and you just wanted one piece that is a representation of a show that you remember, that you enjoyed at some point in your life. That's such a cool way to display it because it has so much nice meaning to it. And that's really beautiful. After seeing it out like that, I think that's like, okay, people are going to aspire to have a wall of cells, I think, in the way that you laid it out, because I think to me that's inspirational.
Well, thanks. I'm surprised that I haven't seen other people do it. It seems so such an easy choice to me. I mean, I just knew right away that this is the way I wanted to do it, and yet I think you're right. Like, I think most people focus on a character or a particular show, or at least like a certain genre.
Right.
And I've never seen another collection quite like this, and in particular the focus on the complete setups. I've never seen another collector focus on that so wholly like I have.
Yeah, it's awesome. You've inspired me to buy frames that are a little bit larger so you can see the end of the background. You can actually see where it ends. I think it looks so much cooler that way. Now that I see them, so many of them like that in that pattern, it looks so cool.
Yeah, thanks. I really think so. Sometimes that reveals fun things like like the Tom and Jerry down here. It unfortunately only has Jerry. I'm still looking for the A+ example of Tom and Jerry. But if you watch this is a complete master setup. If you watch this scene in this episode, at the moment that this cell appears, you can see a little bit of the lettering used for the scene codes on screen, which is a big no-no. You're not supposed to see those. But in this episode, they framed it just wrong enough that you can see a little bit of that lettering.
That's cool, though.
Yeah, it's just a really fun, tidbit that you might not notice if you couldn't see the original. If you couldn't see those letters, you may not have connected what you were seeing down there. I find that stuff fascinating.
Well, I got to imagine you're getting some great feedback of the people that have witnessed and seen the exhibit. In fact, this goes for another couple months till October. Is that right?
That's right. So we'll be up until October 7th. And I would encourage anybody that wants to come see it to, check the website and double check the hours and that sort of thing. I do know that we intend to be open for what's kind of traditional for art galleries. It's the first Friday of each month to have a bit of a reception or extended hours at least. And so that's a good opportunity to come the first Fridays of each month. It's, as I said, it's a free exhibition. So anyone that wants to can make it happen and bring the kids and show them the things.
In looking at some of the artwork online, building a narrative, buildinganarrative.com, Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm jealous because a lot of times you hear people talk about their trip into a gallery and they see animation art, but it's like Los Angeles or New York. You brought this to Lincoln, Nebraska. That's such a unique and awesome thing for that community. That's so awesome that just to see something like this. And, I would guess that this is probably the first this has ever been on display in a community like Lincoln, because I've never seen this anywhere I've ever lived.
Well, thanks. Yeah, and I think you're right. I think this is the first that I'm aware of exhibit like this outside of large museums in big cities. Occasionally you see something similar to this in like Los Angeles or New York, or even places like Tokyo and things like that. But trying to find something like this outside of those major hubs is really hard, and particularly in the Midwest, to find an exhibit like this is really difficult. I've lived in Los Angeles for the last 15 years, but I'm originally from Nebraska, so it was meaningful to bring it back here for Nebraskans and Midwesterners. Nebraska, for those that don't know, is right in the middle of the country, so it's easy to get to for a lot of people.
Yeah. Now, if people wanted to look you up online, I gave the website, the Building a Narrative. But for you, on Twitter, I know you post some things on there. What's the best place people can find you?
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm at Trent Claus, and feel free to take a look on there. And I tend to post about the exhibit and things like that, and occasionally stuff about the work that I do in films and things like that. So yeah, check me out there.
It's super cool. Even just the design of having the words, and they're kind of like on an angle and split. That's such a cool. Everything about it's just so cool. Trent, I got to say, taking this effort. Thank you so much for doing this. Getting the museum in the exhibit, a cameraman involved on top of this too, to follow you around. That takes time and effort to organize that. Truly appreciate that. And I know that there's a lot of people that are going to watch this and truly appreciate it too. So thank you for sharing this.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. And I give credit to Reed, our illustrious cameraman here, and then Emma DeVries, like I said, is the curator of the exhibit, and did so much work, including the things that you were just talking about, the great design on the lettering and just the way everything is laid out so perfectly, and even down to the decals on the windows. Everything has been thought through, and our super awesome like 70s, 80s couch display here, which you can sit on. It's not just part of the exhibit. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and
look at that.
Thanks to the university and the College of Fine and Performing Arts for giving us the opportunity.
Reed, you said, can you turn it around real quick so you can say hi to everyone? Holding the camera this whole time, your arms have to be tired at this point.
I was shaking the whole time.
Look at you. You did such a great job. Thank you for doing that and helping out there.
Thank you.
That was really cool.
Yes.
All right, Trent, I got to say, this was super fun and very informative. And, it's interesting because I don't feel jealous. Normally I would when I see a bunch of work like that. I just feel inspired that this gave me a different idea of a way to collect animation cells and display it. This has really opened my eyes in a certain way. So I think this is a really cool idea. Chronologically speaking, that's a great way to organize it in the way that you did it. And I just love how everything's framed. Everything looks so beautiful, colorful. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for doing this, Trent.
Thanks very much for having me.
How cool was it of Trent to give us that exclusive tour? And I think it's a really cool thing to be able to put your collection on display so other people can learn from them. And I'm sure there are other people that may be now fascinated with animation art and production art that they may too start collecting or learn more about it. And that's the whole point of it. If you have a collection or maybe you have a good story you'd like to share, I'd like to hear from you. Or maybe you just want to talk to me about animation cells. Feel free to leave a comment in the messages here. I'll get back to you on that. And if you want to find me on Twitter, at Ryan Recker, that's another great way to do it. I just do this for fun because I enjoy it, and I hope you enjoy it too. I'm really enjoying the positive feedback too. Thank you for everyone that's commented. It is very encouraging, so I'm glad you're enjoying this as well. All right, we'll see you soon.